Welcome to another deep dive. This time we're taking a look at Bitcoin mining. We got a ton of requests from you guys to dig into this. Seems like everyone wants to know how it works, the economics of it, all that.
Yeah, what's really fascinating is how Bitcoin mining, it's so much more than just, creating new Bitcoin. It's really the backbone of how the whole system works. Keeps it secure, keeps it running, like the foundation of a house. You don't see it, but it's holding everything up.
So, okay, let's break this down a little bit. Bitcoin is this decentralized digital currency, right? No government, no bank, no one's in control of it. It's all based on this tech called a blockchain.
Exactly. It's really revolutionary. Think of the blockchain like a giant public ledger, like a record book that tracks every single Bitcoin transaction ever made. And Bitcoin mining is how we make sure all those transactions are legitimate, and it's how we add them to that record book securely.
So are miners like digital detectives or something, like making sure everything checks out?
That's a great analogy. Yeah, they're using powerful computers to solve these incredibly complex math problems. And the first one to solve it gets to add a new block of transactions to the blockchain. And for their efforts, they get rewarded with brand new Bitcoin. It's a system built on incentives. It encourages people to participate, and it keeps that network secure.
Now, that's a reward system I can get behind. But how did this whole thing get started?
Well, our story begins back in 2009. With this mysterious figure, Satoshi Nakamoto. No one knows who they really were or are, but they published this white paper that basically introduced the concept of Bitcoin to the world. This totally new idea for a decentralized currency that wouldn't need any central authority. I mean, it was radical, and it really sparked this whole new world of finance.
In the very beginning, could anyone just mine Bitcoin? Just boot up their old desktop and get going?
You actually could. Back in the day, it was that simple. You could mine Bitcoin using your computer CPU. Just like mining Bitcoin while you check your email. It's crazy. But as more people got interested, obviously, and the value of Bitcoin went up, things started to change.
It got harder to mine then. More people joined in.
Exactly. The more miners came on board, the more difficult those math problems became. It became this kind of an arms race to get the most powerful hardware.
So what happened next? Everyone just running out to buy the biggest, baddest computers they could find.
It did start that way. People quickly switched from using CPUs to GPUs, those graphics cards that gamers use. Much better at crunching numbers, right? Mm-hmm. Then came FPGAs. Even faster. But the real game changer was when ASICs came along.
ASICs? What are those?
Application-specific integrated circuits. Basically, chips designed for one thing and one thing only. Mining Bitcoin. They were so much faster, so much more efficient than anything that came before. It was a total revolution.
So that was the end of mining Bitcoin at home on your old computer?
Pretty much, yeah. The ASICs changed the game entirely. And that's when we saw these large-scale mining farms start popping up all over the place. Huge warehouses just filled with racks and racks of these ASIC miners, all working 24/7, solving those math problems and trying to get those Bitcoin rewards.
Wow. So Bitcoin mining went from like a hobby to this massive industrial operation.
Exactly. It's a fascinating evolution, actually. It kind of mirrors the way technology changes in other industries, doesn't it? But I think we're getting ahead of ourselves. We've talked about the hardware, but what about the economics of it all? How does a miner actually make money doing this?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about. It can't just be about solving math problems, right?
No, right. Well, there's this whole economic ecosystem built around Bitcoin mining. And it all comes down to balancing the costs with the potential rewards, right? So miners have to think about electricity costs, obviously, the price of the hardware itself, and then the difficulty of mining at any given time.
Okay, so if Bitcoin's price goes up, miners make more money.
Yeah.
But what happens when the price drops? Do they all just shut down shop?
Well, it's not quite that simple. Yeah, Bitcoin's price, it is volatile, we know that. But there's this built-in mechanism that actually adjusts how difficult it is to mine to make sure new Bitcoins are created at a steady rate. So even when the price drops, miners can still make a profit. It might be smaller, but they can still make money.
It's all about staying ahead of the curve, keeping those profits rolling in. Okay, let's talk about something that's been in the news a lot. This whole thing about the environmental impact of Bitcoin mining. Is it really as bad as everyone says?
The energy consumption, yeah, it is a valid concern. It takes a lot of electricity to run all those ASIC miners 24 hours a day. Some estimates say Bitcoin uses as much energy as some entire countries in a year.
It's a lot of power. Are there any ways to make it maybe a little greener? Are people working on that?
There are. Yeah, absolutely. There's this growing movement towards what they call green mining, basically using renewable energy sources like solar, wind, hydropower, to power the mining operations. And actually, some miners are setting up in places where there's a lot of renewable energy already to try and minimize their impact,
Okay, that's good to hear. I mean, it sounds like there's a lot of room for innovation there. Let's switch gears for a minute and talk about security.
Yeah.
I've heard about this thing called a 51% attack. How real of a threat is that?
So a 51% attack, it's It's a theoretical vulnerability, let's say. It's where, like, some entity gets control of more than half of the network's computing power, and then potentially could manipulate the blockchain, like a hostile takeover almost of the whole Bitcoin network.
So could they, like, steal everyone's Gitcoin?
Not exactly. I mean, it wouldn't be that simple. 51% attack, if it did happen, could maybe allow someone to double spend Bitcoins or block certain transactions. But they wouldn't be able to just take everyone's coin. It's more about disrupting the network than actual theft, you know?
Okay, that's a little less scary. But why hasn't anyone actually done this? Pulled off one of these attacks? Is it even possible?
It's possible in theory, but it's incredibly difficult and expensive. The Bitcoin network is designed to be very resilient. Think about it. To control that much computing power, you'd need a ridiculous amount of resources and coordination. And plus, if you did manage to do it, it would probably crash the price of Bitcoin so much that it wouldn't even be worth it. You know what I mean?
So it's like self-defeating.
Exact. The economics of it actually work against a 51% attack succeeding. But that doesn't mean we can just ignore it, right? Security is always going to be a concern. And the Bitcoin community is constantly working on ways to make the network even more secure.
It's like a constant arms race, trying to stay one step ahead. Speaking of the future, what's next for Bitcoin mining? Any crazy new innovations coming down the pipeline?
Ooh, there are some exciting. I mean, it's hard to predict the future, but one thing that's super interesting is the development of new, even more specialized hardware. I mean, we're already seeing companies pushing the limits of what's possible with these new generations of ASICs.
So the hardware arms race is still going strong.
Oh, yeah. And as those chips get even more powerful, we might see these mining farms get even bigger, you know, which could lead to even more centralization. So that's something to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's like this constant push and pull between efficiency and staying decentralized. What about things like quantum computing? I hear that could change everything.
Quantum computing is a wild card for sure. It has the potential to completely transform a lot of industry. Bitcoin mining is no exception. I mean, quantum computers could theoretically be powerful enough to break the cryptography that keeps Bitcoin secure.
So it's a threat, but also maybe an opportunity.
Exactly. If quantum computing does become, you know, a reality, the Bitcoin community is going to have to adapt, find new ways to secure the network, maybe develop quantum-resistant algorithms, or even explore completely new ways of reaching consensus. It's hard to say.
It's incredible how this one technology is driving innovation in so many different areas. But let's not forget about the people behind it all, right?
Yeah.
What about the miners themselves? What are their stories? What motivates them to do this?
That's the great point. It's easy to get caught up in the technical stuff, but Bitcoin mining, it is a human endeavor at the end of the day. And the people involved are as diverse as the technology itself. You have these, you know, tech enthusiasts who are just passionate about Bitcoin and what it represents. You have entrepreneurs who are looking to make money in a new market. You even have environmental activists who are drawn to the possibility of green mining.
It sounds like there's a whole subculture built around this, a real sense of community.
Oh, absolutely. There's a strong sense of camaraderie among Bitcoin miners. They're always sharing knowledge, you know, resources, even strategies. You'll find these online forums, conferences, all buzzing with people talking about the latest hardware, software, mining techniques. It's a global community, really, united by this belief in the power of Bitcoin.
It's amazing how technology can bring people together like that from all over the world.
Yeah.
But it's not all sunshine and roses, right? What are some of the challenges that miners face on a daily basis?
Yeah, Bitcoin mining is a tough business, no doubt about it. It takes a lot of upfront investment, and the rewards aren't always guaranteed. The price of Bitcoin is volatile, as we said, and the difficulty of mining is always changing. Plus, the competition is fierce. To really thrive in this environment, you have to be, you know, tech savvy, business minded, and you have to be able to adapt to change really quickly.
You need a certain kind of grit to make it in the world of Bitcoin mining.
I'd say so, yeah. It's not for everyone, but for those who are willing to put in the work and embrace the challenges, you know, it can be an incredibly rewarding and intellectually stimulating pursuit.
I'm starting to get a real sense of the dedication and the passion that drives these people. But let's zoom out a bit. What about the bigger impact of Bitcoin mining? How does it fit into the global economy, the financial system as a whole?
That's a big question, and it's one that, you know, economists and policymakers are wrestling with right now. Bitcoin mining has already disrupted traditional finance in a lot of ways, and that impact is only going to grow in the years to come.
So how could it potentially change the global financial landscape? Give me the big picture.
One of the biggest potential impacts is it could lead to greater financial inclusion. Right now, billions of people around the world don't have access to basic banking services. Bitcoin gives them a way to participate in the global economy, regardless of where they live or their economic status.
So it's about democratizing access to finance,
Exactly, empowering individuals and communities that have been left out of the system. But of course, there are challenges. Bitcoin, to really reach its full potential, it's got to solve problems like scalability and volatility. The network can only handle a limited number of transactions per second right now, and the price swings can make it risky for some people.
So it's a work in progress, but with a lot of potential upsides.
That's it. Bitcoin's still young, it's constantly evolving and adapting. And the future of Bitcoin mining, well, it's tied to the future of Bitcoin itself.
This deep dive has been incredible so far. We've talked about the technical side, the economics, the environment, security, and even the human stories behind it all. We keep coming back to this one idea, though, centralization. Why is that concept so important to Bitcoin mining?
Centralization is at the core of Bitcoin. It's the idea that no single entity has control over the network. No government, no corporation, no individual. And Bitcoin mining, it plays a vital role in making sure that decentralization stays in place.
Okay, break that down for me. How does mining actually contribute to a decentralized system?
Well, remember, it's the miners who are validating those transactions and adding them to the blockchain. And since, theoretically, anyone can become a miner, it prevents any one entity from taking over the network or manipulating it for their own benefit.
So it's about distributing the power instead of concentrating it in the hands of a few.
Exactly. It's a system designed to resist censorship and control, which is a really powerful concept. But maintaining that decentralization, it's a constant challenge.
What are some of the things that threaten Bitcoin's decentralized nature?
Well, one concern is the rise of these massive mining farms that we've been talking about. As mining gets more and more difficult, it becomes more profitable to operate at a huge scale. And if a small number of these mega farms end up controlling most of the network's computing power, that could really upset the balance, and it could undermine the whole idea of decentralization.
So it's this balancing act between efficiency and keeping things truly distributed.
Exactly. And it's something the community is very aware of and working on solutions for.
What kind of solutions are people exploring to keep things decentralized?
Well, there are a few different approaches. One is to develop more energy-efficient mining hardware that would allow smaller miners to compete more effectively. Another is to encourage the use of mining pools that are designed to be more decentralized by limiting how much computing power any single member can have. And then there are also some really interesting conversations happening about alternative consensus mechanisms that might be more resistant to centralization in the first place.
So it's like a multi-pronged approach: technological innovation, community activism, even philosophical debates, it sounds like.
It is. Maintaining decentralization isn't passive. It takes constant vigilance, adaptation and a willingness to challenge the way things are.
I'm starting to realize that Bitcoin mining isn't just about technology and economics. It's also about values, principles, this vision of a more decentralized and equitable future.
You got it. It's about a fundamental shift in how we think about power, control, and even the nature of money itself.
This is blowing my mind, honestly. We've gone from the nuts and bolts of how a mining rig works to the philosophy of a decentralized future. But let's bring it back down to earth for a second. We've talked about the potential benefits of decentralization. But are there any downsides, any risks to doing things this way?
Yeah, that's a really important question. It's worth thinking about. Like any system, decentralization has its pros and cons. One potential downside is that decision-making, it can be a lot more complicated and potentially slower. With a centralized system, you have someone in charge, right? Decisions get made quickly. But in a decentralized system, you need to reach consensus among a much larger group, and that can take time. It can lead to disagreements.
So it's like a trade-off then between efficiency and resilience. A centralized system, maybe it can move faster, but a decentralized system is harder to manipulate or break.
Right. Exactly. Another potential issue with decentralization is that, you could have fragmentation. The community gets too divided and they can't agree on things. It can lead to instability, maybe even a split in the network.
Yeah, that makes sense. It sounds like finding the right balance is key.
Yeah.
But let's get a little more practical here for a minute. You said earlier that anyone can become a Bitcoin miner. But realistically, how does that actually work? What do you need to get started?
Yeah, you're right. It's not as simple as it sounds. It does take some technical know-how. And the initial investment can be pretty significant. First thing you need to do is decide on your hardware. Basic miners are the way to go if you're serious about it, but they are expensive. And then you got to factor in the cost of electricity, which is, that depends a lot on where you are.
So your location matters. I'd imagine places with cheap electricity are going to be hotspots for miners.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Electricity costs, that's one of the biggest expenses for miners. So a lot of them are setting up in places where power is cheap and plentiful, like countries with hydroelectric dams or geothermal energy.
That's like a modern day gold rush, people looking for the best condition. What else do you need to think about? besides electricity and hardware?
Well, you need a solid internet connection, obviously. And you need to decide on a mining pool to join. Mining pools, they let miners combine their computing power, which increases their odds of actually earning some Bitcoin. And then you'll need to choose some mining software and learn how to use it. That can be pretty simple or pretty complex, depending on your technical skills.
So there is a learning curve.
Yeah.
But it sounds kind of adventurous. What advice would you give to someone who's curious about mining, but maybe a little intimidated by it all?
I'd say just start small. Learn as you go. There are tons of resources online, communities of miners who are always happy to help, give advice. You can troubleshoot problems together. And as you gain experience, you can always scale up your operation later on.
Start small, learn, and grow. That's good advice for almost anything in life, really.
Yeah.
Let's step back for a second and talk about the bigger picture. Some people say that Bitcoin mining is a waste of energy, that it's just a speculative bubble, no real value. What's your take on that?
Those are legitimate concerns, for sure. And we should take them seriously. The energy consumption is something the community is working hard to address, like we talked about with green mining. As for whether it's just a bubble, well, I think it's important to remember that Bitcoin is still a young technology. Its value is still being debated, figured out.
So, too early to write it off completely.
I think so, yeah. Bitcoin has already proven itself as a store of value, a medium of exchange, and a tool for financial inclusion, like we were talking about. And the technology behind it, the blockchain, has the potential to revolutionize so many other industries beyond just finance.
It sounds like there's a lot more to this story than we even realize. Bitcoin mining isn't just about making new coins. It's about pushing the boundaries of technology, challenging the systems we're used to, exploring new possibilities.
Yeah, I like that. It's about innovation, experimentation,
Good.
and a belief that, decentralized systems can create a more fair and resilient world.
This has been an amazing deep dive. Seriously, we've gone from the nitty-gritty details of mining hardware all the way to the philosophical implications of decentralization. And we've barely scratched the surface. We hope you'll continue to explore this for yourself. Keep learning, keep asking questions.
And if you want to really go deep, check out the book Bitcoin Mining: The Uncensored Journey. It's available on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. It's a really great resource for anyone who wants to go beyond the headlines and really understand how this whole thing works.
It sounds like the perfect way to continue this journey. That's all for this deep dive, folks. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, keep exploring and keep diving deep.